Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a new Cardfight Vanguard video for you guys today, and today we are talking about the new episode of the anime that just came out yesterday. And this episode was jam-packed full of content. We had a bunch of character development. We had a whole long 8-turn fight where we got to see an entire new deck, which I can't wait to jump in with you guys about. And we got to see a bunch of setup for the rest of the season. If this episode is any indication of the quality we're getting this season, this might be one of, if not the best season of Cardfight Vanguard like ever. This episode was insane. If you guys enjoy these episode reviews and breakdowns, let me know down in the comments. Drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Come back every week so we can talk about each episode. But enough from me, let's jump into the episode. So this episode was long. This episode felt, well, at least it felt really, really long while I was going through it. It might be because they didn't have the opening in the beginning of the episode. Instead, they opted for a flashback between Now and Kagetsu. So this is what happened when Now said she went away. She went to visit Kagetsu, and we see him saying goodbye to some students that he was teaching how to play Vanguard. She kind of tells him that she's she's a pro. She finally passed the exam to become a pro, and then the conversation ends up drifting into she has a student now. And as she's filling him in about her student, Kagetsu asks if it's a boy, and Now blushes, but she describes him as, someone who's always reaching out for miracles and whatnot, and Kagetsu ends up wanting to meet him. So now it jumps to the present, where the last episode left off with Kagetsu and Akina face to face on the bridge, and Kagetsu says that he wants to fight Akina. So they decide to set up a fight, and we move on from there. We jump over to Hikari, and we see Hikari eating snacks with Yuna and Makoto, and they're having a grand old time because she wants to get in as much food as she can before she goes into, I think she said, like, veggie hell. But she goes to get a chocolate covered banana, and she runs into Erika. Yes, same person. And they have a little bit of an awkward exchange, but as they're talking about Erika showing up, they hear an announcement that Akina is going to be fighting on the main stage. They're using the main stage during the intermission. So Erika and Hikari both dart off to go see the fight. Now we jump over back to America with Danji and Michiru, and Michiru's talking about his past with Kagetsu. So he says that in the past, Kagetsu was a better card fighter than Michiru, but he doesn't know about now. But that still speaks volumes about Kagetsu's skill level. So I'm really excited to see Kagetsu fight. We jump over, we see a huge crowd gathered for Akina's fight at the they might have already been at the stage, but Akina and Kagetsu get ready to fight, and we see that everybody is there. Raika, Erika, Hikari, Suo, Kuon, like everybody came to watch this fight. But now the fight starts, and for anybody who's never seen my fight breakdowns, especially with this new archetype, I did my best to reverse engineer the fight, to figure out the cost for skills, to kind of time what was used when, and if I butcher the names, I'm sorry. Now, going in, there's a couple things that they never include in fights, so I just wanted to let you guys know it happens. Just assume that it happens. They don't emphasize their draw for turn, and they don't emphasize their energy charge. So there may be some energy blast costs in there that I don't declare, only because I don't know what their energy was at, so I don't know what energy they used. But I'm pretty sure I nailed everything else. So with the disclaimer out the way, let's jump into the fight. First things first, we see our grade zeros. Akina is, of course, using Wings of Aspiration Soil, and we get to see Kagetsu's deck. Remember, this is a Brink Gate deck. Envoy of the Moon, Repsold. His whole sub-clan is based on the moon. It's really cool. But Akina goes first. Akina rides Patrol of Gust of Intesta, ends his turn. Now, turn 2, we immediately get to see new cards. Kagetsu rides Faller of the Moon, Fresnel. And on ride, uses Fresnel's skill. So Fresnel has a typical Brant Gate grade 1 skill where it searches out a set order. In this case, it puts it in play. And this set order is called Moongate. We don't get to see what Moongate does this turn. He just immediately sets it. We get a little bit of, out of fight talking, where Kagetsu honestly made me feel like I was watching an old school episode of Vanguard. He starts talking to Akina. He tells Akina, imagine a gateway to another world floating on the moon. And then he says, beyond it exists a myth of the moon that discerns truth. Its name is, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry. I think it's supposed to be a weird way of saying mythic, so that's what I'm gonna go with. But basically that's the subclan of his entire deck, and you'll see as we start going into his cards. But Kagetsu moves to battle, swings with Fresnel. Akina doesn't guard. Kagetsu doesn't get a trigger. Akina takes 1 damage, turns over. First damage of the game, 0-1. Kagetsu's in the lead. Going into turn 3, Akina rides Knight of Great Advance Ascensior and uses Ventesta's skill. Anybody that doesn't remember Ventesta's skill? Auto when this unit is rode upon by Knight of Great Advance Ascensior, call this unit to rearguard, soul charge 1. Akina then calls Knight of Bowstreaks Nobiris, Knight of Gentle Beauty Nobia, and an Aerial Sage. He's going ham. Akina attacks with Nobia. Kagetsu guards. Akina attacks with Ascensior. Kagetsu doesn't guard. Akina doesn't get a trigger. Kagetsu takes 1 damage. And then Akina attacks with Nobiris. This one Kagetsu guards. Turn ends. Damage is 1-1 even. Turn 4. Now we get to see some more of these new cards. Kagetsu rides Vassal of the Moon Ramsden. And uses its skill. When it's placed on Vanguard, check the top 7 cards of your deck, add 1 card. Now, they don't specify this on any of these top 7 effects, but I have to assume this is the case because otherwise this ride line would be insane. But you get to add 1 Mythics card, 1 card with Mythics in its name, and then place 1 card from your hand into your order zone. Order zone becomes important after. I'm assuming that also has to be a Mythics card. Kagetsu adds Crowing Mythics Ravnorau. There we go. Ravnorau. Kagetsu then activates the skill of Moongate. Rest it. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Call 1 Mythics unit. 1 card with Mythics in its card name. Kagetsu then calls Ravnorau off the top 7, and then he calls another one from hand. Akina points out all the copies of this card because now he added 1 from the deck. He put 1 into the order zone. He then checked top 7, called another one, and then called an additional 1 from hand. So he's already revealed 3 different versions. And then Kagetsu reveals that this grade 2 specifically, you can run at 16 copies in the deck. As you guys see how the game unfolds, you'll see why that's actually pretty cool. But Kagetsu moves to battle phase, attacks with Ramsden. Akina doesn't guard. Kagetsu gets a critical trigger. He gives the power to one of his Ragnarows and the critical to Ramsden. Akina gets no damage trigger. Kagetsu then attacks with the Ravnorau that doesn't have power. Akina intercepts, and then Kagetsu attacks with the powered up one, and Akina does guard this. The damage is now 3-1 with Kagetsu in the lead. Akina rides Faded One of Miracles, Raziel. Akina then uses Ascensior's skill. Auto when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 with Raziel in its card name. Choose up to 1 grade 2 or less card from your drop. Call it to rearguard. Akina calls Nobia back from the drop, and with its skill, auto when this unit is placed on rearguard. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard Raziel in its card name, counterblast 1. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Choose up to 1 grade 3 or less card from among them and call it to rearguard, and put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. If it's your battle phase, you reveal the card and you can add it to hand instead. While off the top 3, he calls Gargaon. Akina then attacks with Nobiris. Kagetsu guards. Akina uses Nobiris' skill. Auto rearguard. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard Raziel in its card name, Energy Blast 3. Put this unit into your soul. Draw a card. Look at the top card of your deck and put it to the top or bottom of your deck. Akina then attacks with Raziel and uses Raziel's skill. Auto rearguard when this unit attacks a Vanguard, counterblast 1, choose up to 2 cards from your drop with different grades and a total grade less than or equal to the number of cards in your damage zone and call them to rearguard. Akina is at 3 damage, so at this point he calls Nobiris and another Aerial Sage. Kagetsu doesn't guard. Akina gets a critical off his twin drive, gives the 10k power to Nobia and the critical to his Vanguard. Kagetsu takes 2 damage, gets no damage triggers. Akina attacks with Nobia. Kagetsu doesn't guard, but he does get a heal trigger, so now he stays at 3. Gives 10k to his Vanguard, heals 1 damage. Akina attacks with Nobiris. Kagetsu does guard this one. Turn ends, and the damage is even 3-3. We get a nice chunk of out-of-game talk. Kagetsu points out how much Akina trusts Raziel, and Akina said, you know, Raziel has helped me with something, he helped me perform a miracle, and that this is his one and only alter ego, and that they've been through a lot. And Kagetsu points out, well, he doesn't point out, but he notices that Akina is talking about everything with Raziel in the past tense, and this kind of becomes the theme of the season. where Kagetsu asks, you know, what are you aiming for now? And Akina freezes because he doesn't have a goal right now. But he kind of cuts himself off, and he just says he's just kidding, and he just says that his alter ego is itching, that it wants him to test the Archangel of Miracles. And honestly, I thought some of the lines Kagetsu had in this episode were really, really cool. But then we see this like black energy come out from behind him, and it engulfs the two of them, and boom, they're on the moon. I assume it's the moon of Cray, but I haven't seen something like this since we saw Psyqualia back in the OG and in V. This was really, really cool kind of effect that they did. We haven't seen something like that in a really long time. But now we move into turn 6, and this is where we start seeing a lot of the newer cards. So Kagetsu rides Keeper of the Moon. Again, if I mess this up, don't make fun of me. Weisruger. Kagetsu activates Moongate again, but its effect changes now because Weisruger is his Vanguard. It's look at the top 7, call 1 Mythics unit, and then put 2 from the top 7 into the order zone. So you're pulling 3 cards out of deck. This becomes kind of his whole game plan as we go on. Off the top 7, he calls another Ravnarau, and then he puts 2 cards into the order zone, and then he activates Weisruger's Sill. Now, looking at the cards underneath his soul and the way his soul looks in the next slide, this skill costs a Soul Blast 2. It has to. But Soul Blast 2, and you get to use the effect of Moongate again, which means you tech top 7, call another dude off the top, and then put 2 more cards into the order zone. You're pulling 6 cards out of deck. It's crazy. But this time, he calls a new card. He calls the first Mythics Wolfzahn Rostenier. These names. Or Rostenier. He moves to his battle phase, and this is where we get to find out something fun. These Ravnaraus that he has 16 of, they can boost as grade 2s. So he's got 2 on one side and 1 on the other with this new grade 2 that he just called from the deck. Kagetsu attacks with Wolfzahn and uses its skill. This skill is crazy. When this unit attacks, again, I'm assuming this is a Counterblast 1 because of, you know, when they show his damage later, it gains the skill to attack your opponent's Vanguard and one of their front row rear guards. Also, it gains 5k and draws you a card. That is a lot for a Counterblast 1. But Kagetsu ends up attacking Raziel and Nobia. Akina decides to guard Raziel but doesn't guard the Nobia. Kagetsu attacks with Weisruger and uses its skill. When this unit attacks, Counterblast 1 and call 2 units from the order zone to the same column, and all of your front row gain 5k. Fire skill. A built-in 4th battle and extra power to the front row. Obviously, the whole point of the deck is to get cards into the order zone, so you have them to call out. So you're basically always going to get it. But Akina doesn't guard the Vanguard. Kagetsu doesn't get a trigger. Akina takes 1 damage. Kagetsu then attacks with Ravnarau. Akina doesn't guard. Kagetsu attacks with his other Ravnarau. This one Akina guards. Turn ends. Damage is now 5-3 with Kagetsu in the lead. He had a pretty explosive turn 3. Now going into turn 7, Akina Persona rides Faded King of Miracles, Raziel Vito. Now, for anybody that doesn't know how he's able to Persona ride with a different named Vanguard, it's because Continuous Vanguard, this unit is also regarded as Faded 1 of Miracles Raziel, and during your turn, it gets 5,000 power for each Faded 1 of Miracles Raziel in your soul, and it gains all of their divine skills. That becomes important as he goes into his turn. But Akina calls Nobia from hand and uses its skill to check top 3 and call another Nobia, and then uses Raziel's divine skill, which is a long one, but I'm going to explain it for anybody that doesn't know it. Act Vanguard Circle Soul Blast 1, return all critical triggers from your drop to the deck and shuffle. This unit gets +1 drive until the end of turn, and until the end of that fight, you cannot ride units without Raziel on their card name, and you, the player, get when your damage check reveals a trigger other than a heal trigger. If your damage zone has 5 or more cards, choose a card from your damage zone and heal it, and then you lose this ability. That's Raziel's Miracle. But Akina returns 3 criticals to the deck and then moves to his battle phase. Akina attacks with Nobia. Kagetsu doesn't guard. Akina attacks with his second Nobia. Kagetsu doesn't guard again. Akina attacks with Raziel Vita and uses its skill. Auto Vanguard. This unit attacks, Counterblast 1, choose up to 2 cards from your drop with different grades and a total grade less than or equal to your the number of cards in your damage zone, and call them to rearguard. Same skill as original Raziel, but this is where it gets different. Then you put a grade 3 or greater card with Raziel in its card name from your hand to the soul. Choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop, call to rearguard. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, all the units called by this effect gain 5,000 power until end of turn. So off of this skill, he calls a new Noberis, a Gigantic Masher, and a Gargaon. Pretty solid field. But Kagetsu guards the Vanguard with a perfect guard. Akina gets 2 criticals off his triple drive, and he gives both of the powers to Gigantic Masher, making it huge, and gives the 1 critical to Masher, 1 critical to Noberis. Remember, the Noberis column is gaining 10k off Noberis' skill, and then 5k to both of them off of Raziel's skill, and then Gargaon gains 5k too. So that's already a big column. That's why he gave it all to the Gigantic Masher, which is only gaining 15k. Akina attacks with Gigantic Masher. Kagetsu guards with another perfect guard. Akina attacks with Noberis. This one, I got the numbers for. This was a 53k attack. And the reason I made sure to include this is because of the way Kagetsu guards. Kagetsu does a double intercept and guards with 2 cards from hand. But if you look at what he guarded with a 15k trigger and 3 5ks. That's only 30k in shield. That puts you to 43. And then we find out Weisruger has a defensive skill. And you guys know your boy loves defensive skills, especially when they're like practical. This one, very practical. When a unit with mythics in its card name is placed into the Guardian Circle, you can bottom deck a unit from your drop with mythics in its card name, and the unit gains 5,000 shield. And this dude uses that skill 3 times, giving himself an extra 15,000 shield, which puts him up to 58, which is enough to guard the attack. And I thought that shit was dope, especially since you can use it with cards you guard with from hand or cards you intercept with. Like, I love decks that have that kind of flexibility. And he's fueling himself later. I mean, you're pulling so many cards out of deck, knowing that you have a way to send them back so you don't deck out and so you can keep your combos going, just seems so fire to me. So he survives the turn. Damage is now 5 to 5. It's even. And now we move into the final turn of the game, which is turn 8. Kagetsu starts off by persona riding. Mind you, he ended Akina's turn with 1 card in hand. He persona rides into another copy of Weisruger, and now he's basically plays build the board. Kagetsu uses Moongate, calling a new copy of Rodstanir from the deck and putting 2 cards into the order zone, and then he uses Weisruger's skill to use Moongate again, and you actually see he ends up with, after the persona ride, he has 2 cards on soul, and then after the fact he's down to 1 card. So I'm very sure this skill is a soul blast 2. Kagetsu calls a new copy of Ragnarau and puts 2 cards into the order zone. He calls another Ragnarau from hand, filling up the rest of his rear guard. He puts it behind his Vanguard, so now his entire board's full. Again, I know that's probably not how you say that name. Please bear with me. Kagetsu then plays the last card in his hand, which is an order card called Elif Gulmani. Very weird name, but this is your finisher card. I could see this getting ran. I don't know what the cost for it is, but as long as it's not a counterblast cost, even though this deck doesn't counterblast too crazy, I could definitely see this being played because of what it does. All mythics get 5,000 power, and if they were played by an ability, they gain an additional 5,000 power. So his front row were both played by an ability, so they gain 10k. His entire board gains 5k because he has all mythics minus his Vanguard, and then he persona road, so that's another 10k to the front row. So he's got a lot of power on the board. So he moves to his battle phase. He attacks where Rodstanir and uses its skill to end up attacking Gigantic Masher and Raziel. Akina doesn't guard. He knows he can't guard all the attacks, so he takes the damage and goes for the miracle. Akina gets a critical trigger, uses Raziel's divine skill, heals 1, gains 10k to his Vanguard for the turn. Kagetsu attempts to attack with Weisruger and uses its skill to call another Rodstanir and a Ragnarau to make a new column. And then, of course, he gives his front row 5k. Now, Akina hard guards this with shields. And we get some really interesting dialogue here that I really, really enjoyed. Kagetsu basically asks Akina what makes a miracle in Vanguard. And Akina says, of course, getting a trigger when you really need it, which is true. And Kagetsu kind of goes into like the analytical side of, trigger luck in Vanguard, which I thought that was really cool that they included this dialogue. But basically he talks about how Raziel increases your chance of getting triggers and getting miracle triggers by sending triggers back to deck. Makes sense. Makes sense. But then he points out that there's another way to increase your trigger chances. And he basically points over to his deck and he's like, there are almost no mythic cards left in my deck. I've been pulling out so many. So what do you think my trigger chances are? So he literally told this dude, deck thinning is deck winning. And it's true. This dude's pulling out 6 cards out of his deck every turn. That's insane. By turn 4, turn 5, think about how, yeah, your deck's going to be low, but think about how filtered your deck's going to be. Like, your trigger chances are going to go through the roof. And then he says one of the hardest lines by saying miracles can be created, which I thought was, pretty dope in the situation that he's in. But let's get finished off the turn. Off of his twin drive, Kagetsu gets a critical trigger and a draw trigger, and he gives them both to his Ragnarok. He then attacks with Ragnarok. Akina guards it with a perfect guard, and then he saves his last attack for Rostinir. This one, Akina doesn't guard. Akina takes the 1 damage and ends up losing. So, end of the game, the damage is 6-5 with Kagetsu's win. I thought this fight was fire, and this is, again, the second episode of the anime, and we had such a long, detailed fight. Some of the counterblast costs that I told you guys about, I had to kind of figure them out by how the episode showed their resources. As far as the Vanguard's on-swing skill being a counterblast and Rostinir's skills being on counterblast, those are the only skills I see him using where his damage is face up. And then when we see his damage later on the turn, he has 2 face down, and those are the only skills that he used. So those are the only ones I can think of that constitute a counterblast. But anyway, after the match, Akina thanks Kagetsu for the match, but Kagetsu asks him the big question: why does he play Vanguard? And Akina kind of hesitates, and he ends up thinking about it. He's like, he started playing because of the Fated Clash and trying to save Akari. He was in the Destined Showdown to save Akari and to end up saving now. But now he doesn't really have his own reason to fight. And that's kind of, where his head's at. And when he goes to answer, you see kind of on Kagetsu's face that he's already looks kind of sad. But then they get interrupted by Jinky. Jinky ends up talking about how great the fight was, and he gives our boy Akina an invitation to the deluxe, which we knew was coming. Kagetsu encourages Akina to join. A bunch of people with different motivations, different reasons to fight. He's hoping that Akina will be able to find his own reason to fight. But Akina gets in his own head. He's like, is it okay to join a tournament with no real reason to fight? So Kagetsu's like, I guess I'll have to take responsibility. And he tells Akina, I'm entering the deluxe. If you're not satisfied with the way that match just went, join the deluxe and try and beat me. And let that be your reason to fight. So this motivates Akina, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna do it. Kagetsu ends up giving a new card to Akina. There's a big flash of white, and Akina is face to face with this Griffin unit. And then we actually see him holding the card, and he tells him that that card is special. And when Akina figures out what his reason to fight was, this card will respond to him. We hop over and we see Kagetsu on top of a bridge, kind of beating himself up for asking that question of Akina. And I guess asking that question was a really big deal, because he says he should. It's almost like a weird, not really a flashback, but they do this like weird like circle effect, and we see Hero Voice asking him this question, and he says something that sounds over dramatic, but it's also really depressing. He says, those words could kill someone. I hope I don't get demonetized for that, but I think it's a bit. I mean, I know how big of a deal Vanguard is in its own anime. It's a worldwide phenomenon, but to ask somebody why they play their hobby, being a reason to end their life is just. I don't know if it's over the top or if he really saw some shit, but it's like they've been making Kagetsu really, really interesting, and this dude's been here for 2 episodes, not even a full 2 episodes, but now ends up showing up on the bridge and asks him what he's doing, and they basically talk about entering the deluxe and how they might have to face each other. He tells her that, did she tell Akina that she's in the deluxe? And she like, no, I didn't. And he's just like, I guess I'll have to just help everybody. The last thing we see, or the last set of things we see, is back to Akina, and Akina asks Hikari why she plays. She just says because it's fun. And he's in his room looking at Raziel, and he's just like, yeah, Vanguard's fun, and that should be a good enough reason to fight, right? But he says that doesn't sit right with me. the last thing we see in the episode is Akina at the venue for the deluxe. He decided the night before that he's going to enter. So this whole thing is, I wonder if the whole season is one day. That's going to be cool. But I'm really excited to see what the next fight is. Guys, this episode was fire. This new archetype, the Mythics, I'm definitely going to try it out. You guys know, whenever they announce new cards, we try them out on stream. So if you guys want to be here for that, we'll be streaming this Tuesday for our Cardfight Vanguard stream, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully they all get announced before then. Usually they're pretty good about it. So if you guys want to see this deck in action and want to help me build it, be there. I know, shameless plug. But if this is what episode 2 looks like I'm really, really hyped for this season. And I can't wait to see what else we get. Guys, if you want to check me out on social media, those links are down below. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of this episode and what you're most hyped for. That is it for me. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.